if we're just talking about empathy without assessing it, I think sometimes we're doing a disservice, or at least talking about it without understanding all the different pieces of it. And that's really, why I dove into this so much is it started as a research topic for my dissertation, but once I started kind of applying it with clients and realizing, wow, we're just saying like you got it or you don't.
Mhm.
And that's really hurtful, especially when actually maybe they do have the skills. There's just some barriers there for thinking.
Correct.
So
Correct. Today, I'm with Stevie Hall. Stevie, I have been counting down the days since you and I first met. What a cool topic. And I know all the guys listening to this are going to be like, empathy, Roland, this isn't a cool topic. This is like our least favorite topic. We hate talking about empathy. We never want to hear another podcast episode about empathy again.
Mhm.
However, I'm going to say, Stevie, you have the coolest. I mean, I'll even as a guy in recovery, I will say personally, just hearing your take on this was so refreshing. First, I would love for you to define it for our audience as you define it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I will say the definition I'm going to give you comes from research, so I didn't just like cook this up in my office or anything like that. It really does come from somewhere. But first I want to say to your point, empathy is such a vague topic, right? We mean so much with it, but we don't really define it, so it can be ambiguous and confusing to navigate, like you said. And actually, there was a study in 2016 that came out that said in research we have over 40 definitions of empathy. So you can imagine, even if you are trying to define it, it can be really confusing. But where we're at in research is that we're seeing empathy as a multi-dimensional
Mhm.
concept. There are multiple pieces to it. And that's the model that I use. And it's broken down into three pieces: cognitive empathy, affective empathy, and empathic action. And I
And
can
as
go on if you want.
you,
Okay.
yeah, I like that because it kind of frames for where we're going to go. So for everybody listening today,
Mhm.
this was the exact concept that I was talking about when I met Stevie. Was I've never heard of it being broken down into its parts, and if I have heard about it broken down into its parts, it's usually some woo-woo nonsense around another set of vague terms, right? Oh, trust,
Mhm.
intimacy, vulnerability. It's like, then it's like, oh, it's just this, but then they throw a bunch of other terms at you, which honestly, Stevie, to me, have a bunch of other really vague meanings as well. And
Mhm.
so to me, it's like the further and further I went down the empathy rabbit hole, it got more confusing, not less confusing. So I'm hoping today we can clear some of that up. Now, Stevie, as you remember, my audience, these are high achievers, entrepreneurs, business professionals, sales professionals. These guys love kind of the intellectual understanding about something so that we can
Mhm.
apply it. But I want to kind of start there before we dive in, because I think that is probably our biggest curse, though, because the therapy world has this way of calling us problem solvers, right? And so it's very difficult because we care and then we would love to solve their
Mhm.
problem. And then we're called somebody who lacks empathy and we want to solve
Mhm.
their problem as if we don't care because we want to solve their problem. Please speak
Yeah.
to that aspect.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm smiling while you talk because I just have so many clients moving through my mind where that's exactly the way they express empathy is through problem solving. It's like, you have a problem, I care about you. Here's the solution. But what's missed sometimes is that effective empathy part. So, if we're using the model and thinking about it, when you're problem solving, you're using cognitive empathy, right? You're going, hey, I'm in your perspective. I see there's a problem. This is how I think it could be solved. Boom, here you go. We should feel better, right? So it's almost like he's moving from a cognitive empathy to empathic action. But what's being missed in between is what I think a lot of us actually want to experience in a relationship, and that's the effective empathy. And so when we're practicing effective empathy, it means we're resonating with someone and that we're feeling, in a sense, to a degree that we can what that other person is feeling. And so I think that's the piece we need to try to harness a little bit, because you can use problem solving. Problem solving can be really helpful, right? It can relieve distress and can create regulation. It can give a path forward. But I think a lot of times when we're opening up to someone, we're looking for that other person to say, I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And that's the piece that is sometimes missed.
I love that. So everybody listening to this, and this was the light bulb that turned on for me when I met Stevie, was I was practicing empathy. And actually I was proudly practicing more empathy, probably pretty good. However, just like most skills, we could choose any skills. We could choose sales. We could choose
Mm.
memorization and passing a test. I mean, you choose the skill set. Just because you're good at 80% of it doesn't mean that there aren't aspects of it that you aren't good at. And I think that
Right.
was what was so freeing to me was it's not that I suck at all of it, because that's really depressing. If this is the thing that's going to heal my marriage the most, it was really sad to keep getting beat down of like, oh, well, the only way we're going to be saved is if you can learn this skill set that, that you never learned as a kid,
Yeah.
and by the way, it's the whole reason that I'm supposedly a sex addict, right? Is that I have this intimacy disorder, right? And so it's
Hmm.
a very defeating framework, because it's, I think after about 10 months, which is really sad because those first 10 months when guys get discovered are a total bloodbath. It's just like,
Oh yeah, I'm
everybody's
sorry.
just trying to grab on. But it's really a bummer. After those 10 months, most guys have been told that they're bad at this, they suck at this, they need to get
Hmm.
better at this. And it can be a very defeating road from that day forward. Maybe I'm speaking for myself and projecting here, but I developed a really big complex around trying to be empathetic the right way, to the point where I became actually very robotic when I was placed in a situation where I needed to do
Hmm.
that. So before we keep going down with the framework, I want to just kind of recapture that for everyone, because that was the epiphany for me. Was I actually wasn't as bad at it as I thought, but there was an element of it that I maybe didn't understand. Can you
Hmm.
is my way of explaining that correct? That in that particular example,
Yeah.
problem solving, two were being hit, but one wasn't. And
Hmm.
yeah, talk to that a bit. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, totally. You're understanding it. And I really appreciate that idea of empathy being a skill, because sometimes we see empathy as an all or nothing thing. You either have it or you don't. And I think that's pretty dangerous, and that can feel very defeating if you're telling someone you don't have empathy. And so a lot of my work has been in assessing empathy levels. That way the person knows where are my deficits. And even in these kind of general skills that I gave you, we have sub skills that we look at. And the reason is because if we can identify where you're struggling with empathy, then we might know where the barriers are, which means then that's where we can improve the skill.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this work is the skill is not always empathy, it's actually removing the barrier to empathy, right? So
Explain,
that's a
elaborate on that, because I think we are following you. I just want to make sure we are.
Sure. So, a pretty common barrier to empathy is shame. There's some research that came out in like 2000, so it's kind of old at this point. But what it says is that shame and empathy cannot exist together, because when
Mhm.
you're flooded with shame, you're in the midst of trying to regulate yourself, right? That's where you're at. Like, hey, I'm not bad. I'm not a bad person. Please believe me. That's where you see the defensiveness come out,
Mhm.
right? So, what needs to be improved is not necessarily caring more, like we say, and leaning in more. It's actually what needs to be improved is I need to be able to regulate myself. I need to be able to use my internal boundaries to hear this person's pain, but separate my sense of self and my self worth from the conversation so that I can respond in a meaningful or empathetic way. But that's really hard to do, especially if you're being told you're the problem, right? That's a lot to navigate in the moment. But I say that because empathy is not always the skill that we're trying to improve. It's these other skills that can be a barrier to empathy.
Mhm,
Does that make
mhm, mhm.
sense?
It makes perfect sense, and there's tons of we don't need to get into the science of that, but shame, especially in the last 20 years, oh my gosh, shame has been so well studied. And if you guys look at
I
the
know.
psychology behind what goes into feeling ashamed of oneself or wishing that you were not the way you are, and I kind of want to define it a bunch of different ways, because again, shame, like empathy, I think
Yeah.
also is loosely defined and often misunderstood. And so I think throwing a bunch of different definitions in there can help, because I know a lot of high achievers, we often think, oh, I'm not ashamed of myself, I'm very I love myself, I'm proud of myself. I think for me, and again, I'm projecting a little bit here on my story, but what I didn't realize was that I invented my high achiever kind of identity to not be this person that I was ashamed of. So, if you think about Inception or The Matrix or something,
Hmm.
I'm basically two levels deep, right? At my core, I believe, oh, I'm actually a this, but I'm going to act like this so that I don't have to be single and have no friends and be poor and
Mhm.
have nobody like me and be unattractive. And, so I developed somebody who was. But again, I want everybody to think about that. Even though I was under the delusion that I wasn't ashamed of myself, if I look at where I birthed that new version of me who was perfect, it was birthed from the original identity of, well, if I'm just this way, the way that I actually was born as, this isn't going to cut it. So I'm just kind of explaining a bunch of different ways so everybody understands shame in different ways, because a lot of people do think, oh, I'm not ashamed of myself. And it's like, well, maybe as you dig
Mhm.
deeper, you might find that. So but back into the framework, because I really want everybody to understand this. I think it might be helpful to actually just break down the three aspects and define them separately. Can you do that for us, please?
Mhm. Yes, yeah. And I will try to be succinct, because if you ever heard me talk about this, I could go on and on, because I love it. It's where my research
Well,
is,
you're
but I
really
also
fun to
find it's
listen to.
important.
So be succinct, but don't feel like you need to be too succinct, because you actually
Okay.
are. The way you speak, I feel like, is not super researchy or therapist-y. It's very much somebody who really wants other people to understand this. So please, you're very good at it. But I'd love for you to define the three for our audience. The three, what do you call them? Three aspects of empathy. What do you call them?
Yeah, three
Part.
aspects, three
Mhm.
dimensions.
Sure.
There's multiple ways I think we
Sure.
could say it, but so the three are, let's start with cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is made up of two things. One is perspective taking, and the other is, can I put myself in your shoes? And I know those might sound the same, but there's a nuance here that makes them quite different. Perspective taking is, if I were in that situation, this might be what I would do. The other part is actually, if I were this person in this age dealing with these things, this stuff was going on around me, this is how I would respond. And I'll tell you, I've assessed empathy quite a bit with clients, and this one tends to be a struggle,
Mm.
because we see things from our own worldview, from our own perspective, and how I would respond. So I see this a lot when I'm working with couples, where, if, let's say I'm working with a husband and a wife, and the husband might say, well, that wouldn't bother me, so I wouldn't respond that way. Like, I hear you, but yeah, that example doesn't work for me. When actually what needs to happen is, oh, well, if I were a woman and I had stayed at home for the last 10 years, and I, wasn't sharpened in my skills, and I thought, oh my gosh, my marriage is imploding. How am I going to support myself and my kids? And like, oh, maybe I would respond that way, actually. Of all of those, if that's what my world looked like, yeah, maybe I would respond that way. So that one's a little harder to
Mhm.
do, but it is part of that cognitive empathy. Effective empathy is three different parts. And so effective empathy is that resonating piece, right? It's when I'm sitting with you, I can resonate in a way that I might actually feel it or mirror that emotion. It doesn't have to be really deep, but we need to have some sense of what that person is experiencing. And I see clients struggle with this one sometimes, because we get caught in the cognitive piece again of, well, I haven't had that experience. But I think if we zoom out, we've all kind of had the same experiences in our life, right? Like, I'm sure we can all think of a time we felt rejected
Mhm.
or not good enough, or that we felt abandoned or neglected. And so we can draw on our own experiences to be able to capture what that other person might be experiencing in the moment, even if it's not our story or
Mhm.
an experience that we've had.
Mhm.
The next two pieces look at
And
how does
and
our,
and just to
sorry.
interject there for a second, that
Yeah.
would be the one, at least in my guess, that would be the one that would be the most difficult for sex addicts and betrayed partners. Is that accurate?
Well, what's so interesting about this, and this is why I'm an advocate for assessing empathy, is because I've had many guys, I'll say, in recovery that I've assessed, that I was told they have no empathy. And they come in, and actually, this part on their empathy scale is elevated. It's above the norm,
Mhm.
which actually tells me what they're doing is absorbing their partner's emotion so much that they're getting flooded and they're unable to navigate in the moment, right?
Yes, and
So,
you and I talked
mhm.
about this, right? Because all of my intensives that I've ever been to for sex addiction, and for everybody listening, I went to another one just a couple months ago. So for all you people, like, I know you like want to be recovered, ED ending. I go to two intensives a year, and on all of my intensives, Stevie, I there's always a moment where I just break down in overwhelm for my wife, not me, of just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe what I have done psychologically to this poor person.
Mhm.
And then when we're together, that is not as easy to tap into. So but again, at my core, when I'm being told that I don't feel that, and I know for sure that I am, it's another one of those really defeating aspects when I'm being told something that about me that I don't believe is true. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I just wanted to speak to that because I do think that largely the therapy world does
Mhm.
take that stance that this
Mhm.
aspect guys are bad at. And I just wonder if we're actually bad at it or if there's other elements to allowing it to be seen, used effectively, expressed. I think for me,
Mhm.
I feel it all. I just can't quite get it out of my mouth. So I just wanted to speak to that. I appreciate you said that they actually sometimes have, according to the assessments, it's like, oh, actually, this person has the capacity to deeply appreciate another
Mhm.
person's reality. That's so cool. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah, and
Sorry to
that's
interrupt.
kind of the interesting part about it, right? Is if we're just talking about empathy without assessing it, I think sometimes we're doing a disservice, or at least talking about it without understanding all the different pieces of it. And that's really, why I dove into this so much is it started as a research topic for my dissertation, but once I started kind of applying it with clients and realizing, wow, we're just saying like you got it or you don't.
Mhm.
And that's really hurtful, especially when actually maybe they do have the skills. There's just some barriers there preventing
Correct.
them. So,
Correct. And then the third
um,
element. Sorry, I forgot the
yeah,
third dimension.
no, it's okay. Well, in the second one, in effective empathy, there's a piece that I missed there, which is two components. They're similar, but it's how our mood shifts when we're with the people that we're close to,
Hmm.
and how our mood shifts when we're with people we don't know or we're
Hmm.
detached from. So, for an example, if you get emotionally attached to characters in movies or in books or in the news, that's pretty important to know about, because sometimes what I see is that the person in recovery, they actually have empathy for characters, but they're
Hmm.
struggling to have empathy for people close to them. And have empathy isn't really the right way to say it, but their mood doesn't always shift. They don't have that effective response. And some of that would tell you, like, maybe it's an unsafe environment. Maybe they don't know how to connect safely to the other person. But characters in TV shows and books, that's really safe to connect to,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
I know
And
for
so,
me, growing up in a overly religious and controlling household, anyone being upset or disappointed in how I'm acting causes a total shame response, hiding. Oh God, not
totally.
again. I mean, I
Yeah.
panic because for the first 18 years of my life, that was what it was, oh, what are they going to do?
Mhm.
What are they going to take from me? What are they going to say about me? What are they going to not do for me anymore? And so,
Yeah.
when I'm placed in that environment, I react that way. And I just wanted to bring that up because, again, I feel like it's unfair to say that that makes me an unempathetic individual when 18 years of my life was spent having a very strong reaction to other people having criticizing my way of being.
Hmm. Well, and thank you for sharing that. And what you can imagine is if you're in a moment where there's conflict with someone that you love, that stuff probably comes to the surface. And that is something you're most likely navigating while you're in the midst of trying to navigate that conflict with the other person. So,
Mm-hmm.
really helpful to hear.
But again, two
Uh,
separate issues, right? Like
yeah.
one, like it's not that the empathy is not there. It's that I have a belief that if someone is mad at me about something that I did, that they disapprove of me, that they wish I was
Yes.
different, that they, right. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm making conclusions about what my wife is
No.
saying without actually separate from two separate things, right? It's not my inability to empathize. The empathy is in there. I feel it.
Yeah.
It's my system. But then I have this other belief systems like, oh, when people act this way around you, you need to defend yourself. You need to
Yes.
you need to
Mm-hmm.
keep quiet because if you speak up for yourself, it's going to backfire, right? So I'm actually firing all these other beliefs that have really nothing to do with empathy. Is that, am I
Yeah.
understanding that correctly?
Yes, yes. And what I would say is, if you were my client and we were in a session working on this, I would not be working on your empathy skill of being able to respond to your wife. What we would be working on is that regulation in the moment and
Yeah,
being
I like
able
that.
to sort it out. So just to kind of give some clarity of that difference there,
And
right?
just to show everybody, like, this is why maybe for those of you who are trying really, 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 really hard at this, buying the Help Her Heal workbooks and filling them out and
Great.
practicing your empathy
Yeah.
statements, that, this could be why you're not maybe getting the return on investment. Is there's actually some other areas of how you interpret what's going on in the situation that actually has nothing to do with your ability to empathize with other people, right? Yeah. I just wanted to bring that up for people who are trying really hard, because I know a lot of guys, like, this is important to them, to heal the relationship. And I just want to throw some empathy out there for those
Yes.
of you
Yeah.
who are feeling that way, because it's, I loved Stevie's approach here, because it's like, hey, it might not be your inability to empathize. It actually could be other aspects of your ability to handle and to interpret conflict, and not
Mm-hmm.
going to a shame response when somebody is telling you how you made them feel, right? That's perfectly okay, and you don't need to you don't need to make it about you, right? But let's go to the third one before I keep forgetting.
Yeah. Yeah. So the third one is empathic action. And this is more of what I've pulled into the current empathy model that I use and that I've been testing in my research. And it's broken up into two pieces: motivation and action. And so, do we see that there's motivation to help or care? It's kind of like that compassionate feeling. And then do we see it put into practice? And really, we see that as a component of empathy in research, but the reason why I've highlighted it in my work is because, again, I notice that I do have a lot of clients that I work with that they have the empathy, but for some reason it's not getting translated into practice. And I needed to kind of understand what is that barrier there. And so I think that's important to keep in mind too, that you may not always see um, the response you think you're gonna see,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's
Mm-hmm.
2 pieces here. One is that they may have empathy, but it's not moving into action, and it might be that there's empathy and it's not the response we thought it was gonna be.
Mm-hmm.
Problem solving is a great example, right? There is, like, the motivation and the action, because a lot of the guys I work with, they're not just throwing out a solution they haven't thought of, right? You're talking about high achievers. I work with a ton of engineers, so I know as soon as they hear a problem, the wheels are turning and they're going through every option possible. And then they're going, hey, I found the best one for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that's important to know and to throw
Yeah,
that
it's
in.
a so can I so I want to explain my the barrier, pitfall, flaws as I see it, and then I'd love for you to see
Mhm.
it from in terms of like why this is such an issue, especially within the sex addiction and betrayal recovery space. So what I'm hearing in terms of how you explain this, and then the challenges that we see within the field is, here we have these individuals who actually might be decent at this. Some of them, according to you, actually could potentially be better than even their partner in theory.
Mhm.
But that what I hear is, like, because of how we've defined it, and how, because we're asking them essentially, hey, if it doesn't look like this, and if your wife doesn't feel this when you do it, then it's not empathy. And I think that's the challenge, is it's this convoluted definition of this kind of over rigid, concrete way that it needs to look, which
Mhm.
is a lot of the workbooks kind of focus around that, is you have to somehow have this like hyper awareness of like their emotions. And then you also have to have this like crazy skill of knowing exactly what to say to help that person. I think that, to me,
Mhm.
is the flaw as I see it, is rather than looking at the intent, or maybe what's going on inside of the individual of
Mhm.
their efforts, or it's
Yeah.
this, well, it wasn't said this way and I didn't feel this way, so therefore you're bad at empathy. And I think that's, like you said, I think that's I'm not sure that's how it's defined, and I'm not sure that's fair, because I think if we took that same stance on a lot of things, Stevie, a lot of people would suck at a lot of stuff, because it's like there's a
Mhm.
lot of times where, like, I really want someone to do something for me and they do it and it's fine, but like I really would have rather they did it this way. Or like I look at it and I'm like, oh, hey, thanks, and I'm just like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I should have just done this myself, right? So it's not,
No.
the intent was to be helpful. They tried their
Mhm.
hardest, and maybe I didn't. Maybe my definition of them doing it was different, and I didn't make that clear. We haven't had discussions on how we might see it
Yeah.
differently.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
my point of going on and on and on here is, it seems as if we've put ourselves in this corner where it's actually quite difficult for two unique, complex humans with different backgrounds, different parents, different lives, and different
Yeah.
perceptions to now come into this place where they have to do the perfect thing for this person for it to look like empathy. It's quite intimidating. And so I think the way you break it down is very different, because it's not seen as this you either know how to do it or not, and the primary measurement being your wife feeling empathized with. I think ultimately that is the goal, right? So I'm not saying that that's not the
Yeah.
goal, because if she's not
Mhm.
feeling empathized with, then that's a real bummer. But I
Mhm.
often, as I'm looking at this, I often wonder, like, are we looking for the wrong things though? And if we changed our mindset and actually we're looking for empathy as a different definition, will we see more of it? Will we see some
Mhm.
more effort? So anyways, that was kind of my summary of the troubles that I see with the way that this is practiced amongst the people within within the sex addiction and betrayal recovery field. How do you, what would you change about how I said it? And what would you say in terms of your passion to changing the narrative?
Sure. So, I think the workbooks aren't necessarily wrong in what they're giving, right? Because I think a lot of these exercises are things that can help improve empathy, and they can highlight certain things. But to your point, I think sometimes what is being missed, it's two pieces. One, have we had a conversation with our partner about how they like to be empathized with, right? Specifically talking about like romantic relationship empathy, because you can use empathy in many ways,
Mhm.
right? And also, has that partner recognized that you may miss the mark sometimes for them, but it doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? And I think that's what you were really trying to highlight,
Mhm.
is that I do think in my work that I've seen, sometimes it's unfair if you see someone who's really trying, they're doing empathy, but their partner isn't feeling different, or maybe it wasn't the best response that anyone could have ever come up with. It again, we're in that all or nothing, black and white, because it wasn't perfect, or it didn't change the way I'm feeling. It wasn't empathy, and I think that that can be dangerous.
Mhm.
We can have conversations, right? Because if I'm really upset and triggered, or having an emotional reaction, maybe there are some things I would find empathetic and other things that I wouldn't. But I need to have that conversation so that you have the skill set, right? So that
Mhm.
you know what to keep in your toolbox to help me out.
Mhm.
I think that that's really important there. The other piece that I just want to highlight is, and I think this relates to what you're saying. It's just I'm gonna kind of go around on a long tangent here. So empathy is useful in so many areas, not just in romantic relationships. And so if you look at empathy from an emotional intelligence perspective, and I don't know how much you've studied emotional intelligence, typically look up.
I was actually going to recommend that I don't know if you've done the 2.0 book and then done the test before
Mm,
and then the test after. I'm sure a lot of the listeners on my podcast have, because it's very common in
exactly.
amongst business and professional circles. But yeah, the
Mhm.
emotional intelligence 2.0 book, it's, you take the test, then you read the book, you practice all of the practices, and then you take the test again. And my scores, I mean, they by the time I did it for a year, I almost got back up into the 90s. So I was going to tell you, can you give us a empathy 2.0 workbook that
Yeah.
we can start practicing these things and go back and improve the test? So yes, anyways, keep
Mm.
going. Sorry. Sorry for the
Well,
tangent.
that's a really cool idea. Yeah, so it's interesting even that you brought this up, right? Because in the last couple of years, I've really gotten into empathy research, of course, but also sharing it with other professionals, and trying to tweak it in a way where it's relevant to those groups, right? Because, for instance, I did a presentation last fall for teachers, and I'm not going in talking about like sex addiction and when your partner doesn't respond well. I had to really tweak the empathy research, or the message of the empathy research, so that it was understood. And part of what I did was I went through an emotional intelligence lens. And there's a piece of emotional intelligence, it's kind of like a graphic or a flow chart that I really like. And the idea is, to have empathy, let's say, I need to start with self awareness, right? And with self awareness, I can move into self management. And then with self-management, I can move into social awareness, and then I can move into social management, right? And I think that that's really important because we need to first have some awareness of what's happening on the inside, and then we need to be able to manage that. Then
Mhm.
when we can do that, we can start to notice how other people are feeling and responding. And I say that because I think that's what the workbooks are trying to capture, of trying to guess or understand what your partner's experiencing. We can't really do that if we haven't done that work on ourselves,
Mhm.
right? If I don't have an emotional, sorry, an empathy map of myself, that's what I call it in my work is, let's talk about your empathy map. Let's draw out your empathy map. So if I don't understand my own emotional system, it's going to be really hard to be in the moment with someone and
Mhm.
understand what they might be feeling, and
Mhm.
or at least just even have an idea to be able to give a response. And again, I think that's what the workbooks are aiming for. But what we're missing is that internal work that needs to be
Mhm.
done for good empathy,
Yeah,
right?
so well said. I think, it's the whole, and everybody's heard all this, right? You can't know love without
Hmm.
loss. You can't know happiness without sadness, right? It's the understanding of the two poles that allow us to be
Hmm.
able to maximize the two poles. And so, there's
Yeah.
even people that say you don't know real happiness, real joy unless you've actually, the more you suffer, the more you can feel on the flip side, right? So, and I can just tell you from I've never experienced anything more than post betraying my wife and going through recovery, because the emotions that I felt through healing and discovery and disclosure and all, I mean, were the lowest of lows ever. And
Yeah.
that has also allowed me to have this understanding of highs, and then also a I have like a mild problem, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is nothing. Whereas back in the day,
Mm.
I might have panicked about that problem. So where I'm going with this is, um, and because this is something that I've come to realize, Stevie, was um, I I can't, the workbooks don't hit because I don't have a reference of understanding what they're really talking about. To me, when
Mm.
someone comes to me and they say, Roland, that must be really hard after I told them something, my reaction is, I'm annoyed, because I'm like, yeah, that's why I told you it was hard. Like, I told you about it. I told you it was hard, and I want you to help me. Right. And so
Mhm.
I don't seek empathy and advice very often, because to me, in the realm of my understanding,
Yeah.
that is of no good to me. Now, what
Mhm.
I've come to understand was, I only think it's of no good to me because I don't understand that entire, what would you call that middle, not the cognitive, not the action. What's the other
Oh,
one?
the effective, the
The
effective.
effective. So
Yeah.
so what I've grown to understand is I don't really understand the effective piece enough to see the value in it or to practice it. I just simply, it is such a foreign, it's like a language I've never spoke. I look at it
Yeah.
and I see the whole things, but I'm just like, I just don't really understand why anyone would want it. I don't understand why they find it so valuable. I don't understand why that makes them feel good. I'm dead serious. And to this day, like, those statements, I don't see why. Like, when I hear my wife getting empathized with from her friends, her betrayed partner friends,
Mhm.
I hear that and I'm like, that's helpful to you. Like you found that comforting. Like, I hear that and I'm like,
Yeah.
that would have meant nothing to me. And I have friends who are very in tune with all aspects. They're very good at all aspects of empathy, like empathetic masters, and they try to empathize with me, and it doesn't work. So
Mhm.
I wanted to speak to what you said. I don't think the issue is always
Yeah.
that he's bad at empathy. I think sometimes, and throwing the workbook at somebody who doesn't understand fundamentally even really what's going on with that concept, it'd be really hard to have that workbook work, because it's like, I'm still not following why somebody telling you that that must be hard is such a beneficial statement, because to me, I don't find it beneficial. Can you speak to why that would make my wife feel so good and not me?
Mhm. Well, when you're talking about this, this reminds me of something. Brene Brown, who, has done a lot of empathy and shame work, she has this video, and there's a piece of the video. The video is empathy versus sympathy. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a piece of the video that has always captured me that I think is really symbolic of what empathy is. And it's these two like little animal characters, and one of them is in a deep, dark pit, And the other one is standing on the edge of the pit going, oh, it's really dark in there. And I think that's sometimes how you might feel when someone says that's really hard. Like you're in this deep, dark pit, you're feeling helpless, there's no ladder to get out. And the other person's like, wow, that looks really hard. Like that must be a difficult place to be in. And really, what we need is someone to kind of crawl into the pit with us, right? And sometimes that doesn't mean you have a solution. I think one of the most validating things we can say to someone is like, yeah, this does suck. Like, this is horrible. Or like, I, I looked at this and I can't even find a solution, right? And that can be very validating for, okay, I'm stuck because that's real. Like, there's a stuckness here,
Mhm.
right? But it requires that person to get a ladder and to crawl down into the pit. And imagine for your wife, all of those women are in the pit, right?
Mhm.
They're all there. So when they say that must be really difficult, they're speaking from the pit. They're not above the
Mhm.
pit going, "Hey sister, I found my way out and you can too." That they're in that dark place as well. So I wonder if that's kind of part of
Oh my
the
gosh,
difference.
Stevie, can you stop being so smart and good at everything you do? You really are. I don't want to hog the airtime with this, but I meant everything I said when I met you. There you have the gift, and I'm sure my listeners are going to send me messages as well. You're very that is the issue. The issue is all
Okay.
their peers are down there and they're like, yeah, girl, I totally,
Mhm.
and I'm not down there. So, but
Mhm.
again, here we go. I'm gonna push on you. I love those little memes and they are so touching. And how do I climb down there with her? I don't know. My impression is that I can't. That stuff has never been done to me by someone who I never imagined would do it to me. And so like really to climb down there, I like try to climb down there, but one of two things. I'm either too scared to go down there because I don't want to deal with the ugliness of
Yeah,
that.
that's a big piece,
Or
right? Mhm.
or two, I don't know where to climb down because I can't appreciate the ugliness of the conclusions that she has come to. And so I think it's both times I've been on the ladder and I really want to go down. There's
Yeah.
just some reason why I can't go down there. So all cute little touching meme, imagery aside,
Mhm.
tactically, like, what are we supposed to do with that? Like, I do
Yeah.
agree with you. If I was down there with her, no doubt about it, I could say probably almost anything and it would just feel good. And anytime that I'm not, where it doesn't land, help me with
Yeah.
this. Like, what do I
Yeah.
do about that? What do all of us guys do about it? Because this is a very hard feeling for us we've never been a female in the United States. We've
Mhm.
never been a female being betrayed by somebody who we never imagined would betray us. How do I get into that hole if I have this like total gap of understanding of what they're dealing with?
Yeah. So you bring up a great point, and I think it's one of those empathy barriers, right? And I think especially with people who problem solve or they're high achievers or anything in that realm, um, it can really create this feeling of being stuck. And a lot of the clients I work with, they don't go further because they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Said, well, if I don't know what to do, I'm definitely not going to get in there and make it worse, right? And you know, I just want to humanize this whole process that, part of what I do for work and helping people is to empathize with them, right? If you look at the core tenets of therapy, one of them is to be empathetic. And there are times I don't know what to do. I'm sitting in a room and I'm like, wow, this is really hard. There's nothing I can say to take this away. This person just lost the most important person in their life. There's nothing I can say to make that different, right? And so I think we have to let go of the outcome
Yeah.
of what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to move this person to a different place. I'm trying to be with them. And what is it like to be with them in this
Mhm.
moment? So when you think about empathy, the original definition, part of the original definition was feeling into. So it's kind of this idea of how do I feel this experience with this person? And that's sometimes what we're avoiding, especially with intimacy disorders, right? Like, I don't want to feel that yuckiness, or I don't want to feel disempowered with you, right? But when we can kind of crawl into that space and go, I'm sorry, this is so hard. I don't even know what to say, but like I'm here, or, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. If you don't, please know you're on this is on my mind. Physical touch can be helpful if it's appropriate. but we don't have to have the perfect response. We're
Mhm.
not trying to move someone from what they're feeling. Actually, that can be dismissive,
Mhm.
right? Like, hey, okay, let's get through this emotion, and get on to feeling something different. I think one of the most empathetic things we can do is to sit with someone in their suffering.
Mhm. And and I know everyone has heard that before, and it's still so frustrating to hear that. I think
Yeah.
the easiest way for me to describe it in terms of how I've been able to navigate it is, I make it about me all the time, even if I'm trying to make it about her. So I'm like,
Hmm.
even my desire to get her to move on and be happy, that's about me. She didn't necessarily ask for that. And
Yeah.
so another example would be, I'm thinking, I'm seeing the flaws in her worldview of like, oh, well, because you did this, this, and this, that means you think this and this and this about me. And my head immediately goes to the 25 rebuttal arguments as to no, actually, because if I thought that, that, and that about you, then all of these other things would have been happening. Right. So, but again, it's all going into me, my perspective, my assessment of her belief system, my assessment of how to, and it prevents me from crawling down in that hole with her and just allowing her to be there. Because again, where I'm going is and again, to empathize with the guys, a lot of us hate bad emotions, and I just want to be happy as fast as I can. And so if you can say something to me to make me happy, and I don't have to like deal with any of this, and I can just be happy with you saying something. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like as a guy, I'm just like, yeah, please, whatever that thing is, say it to me so I can like start
Hmm.
feeling happy. I don't know about the rest of your wives, of the guys who are listening. I'm not married to your wife, so I don't know, but I would say my wife wants to feel these. I mean, she wants to. And I know it's weird for us guys because we're like, why would you want to feel a negative feeling, a negative emotion? Like, why would you want to like escape that? Uh, I don't know. My wife loves it. She, as much as it feels horrible, to her, the right thing to do is to sit in it and to feel it all the way and to
Yeah.
express it to others and work on it. And, escapism isn't really a thing for her. And so I
Mm-mm.
think that's as you were kind of walking through that analogy, I think that's the challenge for me is, another barrier for me not wanting to jump down there is like, it just looks like I see her just like wanting to feel it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, do I even want to jump down in there? Like if she doesn't
Yeah.
want a solution, she wants me to sit there. She actually knows there isn't a solution. She wants me to just like
Mhm.
literally sit with her in the sad reality that,
Yeah.
I might not get blindly trusted ever again. And she's going to
Mhm.
have to be with somebody who is a liar and could lie at any moment. Right. And I'm just like, I think part of it is I look down there and I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I want to sign on to be that guy. I'm tastefully
Mhm.
staying in some denial.
Yeah.
What comes up when I say that?
Well, it's interesting because these uncomfortable emotions, I think we all want to pull away from, right? And especially when there's someone else experiencing them and you feel like, gosh, if I lean into that, who knows when we're going to get out of it, right? This could be a really long process. But what's interesting is, at least in my work, what I see is when you do lean into it, when you do go into the emotion, when you sit with your partner, it moves much faster than if you don't. It's counterintuitive, I know, because you're thinking, "No way am I gonna go into that. This is gonna be horrible." But I think there's something so validating and helpful when someone joins a moment with us that
Mhm,
allows us to feel okay, and it's kind of like that co-regulation, and then we can begin to maybe shift out of it. Right.
mhm,
But a lot of us are afraid of emotions, and at least a lot of the guys I work with, like some that are very similar to your audience as you describe them. And I think it's because we see emotions as being unhelpful and we see emotions as barriers,
mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
I
Yeah,
need to be
neutral.
rational and logical, and emotions totally get in the way. But I at least come from a little bit of a different camp in some of the research that I've done, and I think emotions can help us be more rational if you can listen to them and you understand like why that emotion is there, right? So, for example, anger tells us that a boundary's been crossed or a value's been challenged. So, if I'm feeling angry and I go, okay, has a boundary been crossed? Has a value been challenged? If it's yes, okay, now I know what to do to help
Mhm,
myself, right? I moved right into being rational instead of, hitting my fist on the table or huffing and puffing, I can move right into a solution. Um, on the other side of that, if I'm asking that question and the answer is no, it tells me maybe I'm feeling something else and I got to dig a little bit deeper, right? I think it's the same thing when we're practicing
mhm,
empathy with someone. If we can use our own empathy map and identify what emotion they might be feeling could help us in supporting them and like being able to lean into that. And again, the point isn't to shift your partner into something else, but it might help you feel equipped in being in that moment,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
okay,
mhm,
if she's feeling angry, maybe it's because a boundary's been crossed at some point or a value's been challenged. And so maybe what I could do is to reassure her that I'm doing my best to uphold the boundaries, right?
mhm,
Like, you know
mhm,
what? Y- That thought may never leave you. And I know that you're fearful that I could be lying to you
mhm.
again. And I just want to let you know I'm doing everything I can to uphold the boundaries. This is what they are. We can change them at any time if you need to. I mean, I don't know what your partner might need.
Mhm.
I'm throwing things out there, but that leaning in, I think, is much more effective than the leaning out, right? Like
Well,
the
and think
looking
about what you
into the
just
pit.
did. Well, and you just did empathy in that exercise, right? I don't know if you guys heard that when you heard Stevie talking, but you know, that deep understanding of, and this is where Stevie's empathetic intelligence 2.0 book that I'm forcing her to write one day will help us all, is that understanding of, okay, what are emotions? Okay, she's feeling anger. Well, what I know about anger is that is when she's been, she's had this boundary being violated, right? And what's this boundary I violated? Well, I cheated on her. And so I am now someone who has the capacity to do that. And so she is sitting in there and she may not want to get over the anger because she doesn't want to accept that I'm a cheater. She doesn't want to accept that I violated a barrier that she has told herself her whole life up until this point, that if some guy did that to her, she would leave him. And
Of
now
course.
here
Yeah.
she is
Hmm.
staying. Do you guys like, so I think to your point, Stevie, if for guy, and we're transitioning into where I want to end, which is action. Like what do we actually do about this if we're gonna start to change? I think this is a great leader into that discussion, which is that is empathy, is jumping down there and being like, okay, wow, all right, this person is angry. She actually might not want to be not angry, because to her that would be dismissing a value of hers. That would be letting me get away with it. That would be her
Yeah.
selling out. Right. And so
Hmm.
you can see her wrestling with this, like,
Totally.
part of me wants to be with him because I understand that I don't think he meant to do this to me. But then at the same time, he violated one of my core boundaries. Right.
Yeah.
And so can you see this? Can you appreciate why she might be sitting in that hole when she's wrestling with that concept of, I have
Yeah.
to make a judgment call. Do I bend on something that I told myself my whole life I was never going to bend on? Right. And so I think that I don't know if you meant to give that example, but I mean, that's what it's like to jump down into that hole, is like, and I say that because as a guy, I like to intellectualize things. And so if you can
Hmm.
give me like a roadmap to understand her anger and what she might be wrestling with down there in that hole, I'm going to feel a lot more confident jumping in if I can intellectualize it. But if you're going to have me go down there with an open heart, I don't know. I mean, ask me in
Yeah,
5
of
years.
course.
So, Stevie, let's
Yeah.
let's tie this up in a bow so that these guys can do something with it. I always go first. I'll let you go
Um,
second. I think the thing for me, guys, is, at least from what I've seen, the two things that I've seen change this aspect for men. And what I mean by this aspect is practicing empathy, understanding empathy, utilize empathy in your recovery and your relational healing as well. I think the two things that I've seen the most is um, shame reduction. I define that a little bit differently than most. I don't, the focus is on I am bad. I am bad. My population, I don't think we ever felt like bad people and still never felt like a bad person. I
mhm.
define it more so as um, the it as high achievers, it's hard to know that we used our life force to become somebody that is somebody we didn't want to be. And so I know, like, we might not consider that shame, but like, that's shame, right? Like, you
Mhm.
sitting with the
Mhm.
idea that, man, I have used a lot of my energy and being to be someone that my kids would be ashamed of, right? So guys,
Yeah.
don't think that because you're very intentional and that you're not ashamed of yourself, because that, what I just said, doing something that your wife would leave you and that your kids would lose respect for you, guys, that's shame.
Mhm.
I mean, that is just
Yeah.
shame, right? So
Yeah.
shame reduction. What's the best way to reduce shame in sex addiction space? Peer support. Being around a
Yeah.
bunch of other guys that you respect and admire, who have done the same things or worse that you have done, who don't, like, literally, you tell them all the stuff you've done, they're like, yep, done all that, or know a guy who did all that to the point where it's a non-issue and there's like literally zero judgment, because that's how it goes in the sex addiction groups. Is, I mean, these guys have done all the same stuff. They know guys have done the same stuff. So I mean, why are we going to call you? And you're here in this room, so like, why would we love you less? Like, you're
Yeah.
literally trying to change. So that's number one for me, is find a killer peer support group. Second one that comes to mind in terms of guys that I've seen is practice empathy with your peer support group. You know, a lot of the check-ins, you know, the challenge with 12-step is you're supposed to make it about you and it's not supposed to be cross-talky. But maybe get into a different peer support group out there where you can listen to the other guy and, you know, pour love into him to the best of your ability. And I know that sounds like everybody listening is going to be like, well, we're bad at empathy, so we can't do that. You can in this field, you can in this space, because you guys know exactly what it's like. I mean, maybe you didn't do the thing that he did to his wife, but you know what it's like to have your wife call you a monster. You do know that, and you know how it made you feel when she did that to you. That's empathy. It's a prime example to help this poor brother who's struggling to grasp on, hey, my wife said all the same things, and here we are 2 years later, and she doesn't say those to me anymore. That's empathy, guys. So to me, I think, you know, the sex addiction space was such a gift to me, because I, for the first time, got handed on a platter the easiest way to allow men to empathize with me and allow me to empathize with them. And I would have probably never allowed that had I not been forced into this really dark place where I needed help. I mean, I straight up needed help. So those are my advices. Don't just go to meetings, guys. Like, when you're there, connect and do everything that you can with connection, because that will translate over into your marriage. Promise you that. Stevie, what
Yeah,
action can
absolutely.
you come up with?
Yeah, well, I think, part of my takeaway in this conversation is that if we want to be better at empathy, we've got to first start with like self-awareness and managing ourselves, right? And that just might be the key to being better at empathy. And the example that we kind of talked about here at the end, something that I noticed after we talked through it is that the first thing I did was remove the personalization.
Mhm.
Right? Like, yeah, totally, you might feel that way that I'm a liar. I didn't go into, I haven't lied in 10 months and I'm so much better and I've been doing all these meetings and why don't you trust me now? I just being able to step into that person's reality and accept that, hey, it's okay. They have a different reality right now, right? It's that depersonalizing so
Mhm.
that we can be
Mhm.
empathetic, but we can only do that through kind of working on ourselves. And
Mhm.
so I think it's not just about being better at empathy and caring more. But it's about, do I understand what's happening inside of me so that I can understand what might be happening inside of someone else and to be able to build a bridge between the two to let them know I'm here in that moment with them, that, I have some sense of what they're going through, even if I can't solve it and I can't make it different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so oh my gosh, I love what you just said there. That right there is it's the reason why this recovery, especially from not just from sobriety standpoint, but from a relational recovery standpoint, I think it's why they put such a thick timestamp on it. Is the skills that needed to be developed take years to years to develop, and so to really step into
Mhm.
that thriving space, you
Mhm.
know, you're gonna have your self mastery work is gonna have to be like on level 10. I mean, it's just a very advanced level. Stevie, this was
Yeah,
so awesome.
awesome.
I don't care what your answer is. I'm forcing you to come back and do another one with me in 6 months, because this was way too good.
Yeah, I would love
Um,
to.
yeah, Stevie, where, if people are going to try to consume some of this, where do they go? How do they work with you?
Mhm.
What states are you licensed in? How does somebody get more of Stevie in their life?
Sure. So a lot of my empathy, like research and work, is on my website, relationalempathy.com.
Mhm.
If you want to see what I've been doing therapy wise, that's on a website called arisedallas.com, ARISE. I am based in Dallas, but I'm licensed in Texas, Colorado, and Florida. And then a lot of the work that I'm, doing in the empathy space is coaching work. So
Mhm.
I can really, if someone's just
Yeah,
needing some
cool.
coaching, I can work with them kind of from anywhere.
Yeah, do you work with men, women, and couples, or just men? All of
Yes,
it.
I do. Well, a lot of times what happens is I will assess the
Sure.
person in recovery, and then their partner wants an assessment too. And that is really fun work because when both people have an empathy assessment, wow, just the work totally shifts
Oh
every
my
time I've done it.
gosh.
It's really cool.
What's
So
your calendar look like next week for my wife and
yeah.
I? And no, seriously, send me an email. Stevie, this was so awesome. I don't, I, you're just, I just love it. I really love it. I can't imagine all the guys aren't going to love this. The way you speak about this, it's very freeing. It's very empowering. You know, I love comparing it to emotional intelligence. It gives us something to work on, something to improve. It is a skill. And if you're not taught this skill by your parents, which a lot of us aren't, how were you supposed to be good at it? Right. So, you know, it's just, it's this thing that can be practiced, and it's this thing that you're probably also not that bad about. And my guess is, and I'm excited for this empathy intelligence 2.0 future book one day. You know, like just like the emotional intelligence book speaks about, just because you suck in one category doesn't mean we can't leverage the heck out of the other three to still make a ton of progress. And I think that's kind of what you're stating with empathy, is like, it's not all or nothing. Like, we can still triple down on some of the other aspects while you're developing your weaknesses. But Stevie, this was so great. Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on. Can't wait till we do it
thank
again.
you.